management perspective, I mean, how does one address and balance the business requirements, as you mentioned, such as speed to market, predictive accuracy, innovation, and then technical requirements such as platform efficiencies, control, and scale with regulatory requirements around model governance?
So again, great question. Let me provide some historical context. So with financial institutions, in particular, consumer financial businesses, modeling and use of models and strategies in business decision-making has been going on for the last few decades, but with a limited set of statistical and mathematical techniques, which have expanded more recently. But another important sort of issue that has emerged since the Great Depression or Great Recession, I should say, of 2008, 2009, is that that's when, as a result of Dodd-Frank and greater regulatory governance around bank holding companies and stress testing of bank holding companies to make sure that they were not going to negatively affect the overall financial system, a number of different strictures were put in place. And one example is the core regulatory rules around model governance, which is SR 11.7 and its successive amendments. So the point here is that in order to make sure that we have great analytics, great models, you have to make sure that there is, for example, peer review, there is documentation, that when you introduce new modeling techniques, that it's transparent to both the regulators as well as internal constituents as to how it affects business decision making. So you can't just introduce a black box model and ensure that it does not have bias, for example, in regard to fair lending questions. That's a very simple example. So, or for example, if you're introducing new classes of fraud models, you want to make sure that those fraud models catch the criminals but don't affect redlining, for example. So all these issues in one way affect business outcomes in a positive way, but then we have to make sure that they're compliant and they're doing the right thing for the customer base and from a sustained profitability perspective. And central to this question is really having a production environment. So from 2008, 2009, there have been attempts, I think, to create production solutions, platforms, but I think till recently, when companies like ModelOp have come into the picture to provide these kinds of solutions, we really haven't taken this as seriously as we should. And I think one of the reasons why there is a lot of attention right now on creating sort of a model operation solution or model operation environment is because of the proliferation of AI and ML techniques. You also have a proliferation of the underlying data. A lot of that data may not be in the right format, may not be clean to the extent that we want from a regulatory perspective. So you want to make sure that you have nice, clean data and you have explainable AI and ML models. And so therefore, I think having model production environments is more urgent today than it was, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, when there was a proliferation of governance and capital reserving models, but not necessarily a proliferation of techniques, which has happened more recently.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Shrikant. I mean, that's really, as we've delivered ModelOp Center to the market, especially the highly regulated market, as a enterprise class model production solution, we've really known the leading features that have been driven into ModelOp Center that both creates differentiation for us, but really is solving the real pain in our customer base, is this kind of tight integration with very complex, as you mentioned, like very complex models in terms of their relationship to technology and data, right? And this kind of a need for the existing model risk management systems to be able to handle the outcomes of that gracefully, but also now provide feedback at a pace that is being driven by the AI and ML. The pacing of the process is now driven more from the technical pacing and less from just the business, standard business pacing. So you might have to get regulatory reports out at a much higher pace than ever before because models might be retrained. And so it's exactly what you said, whether they are, in compliance with respect to bias or redlining. Now that process might have to be, run on a daily basis, where previously maybe a model would have only been refreshed on a weekly or monthly, or even semi-annual basis. And so, being able to tighten all that together in an automated framework, and I think automation is another key for acceleration of the impact of AI and ML into existing governance and compliance processes in large organizations. It's really critical for there to be some ability to see exactly how these models as first-class assets fit into all of these existing processes, and how that can be tightly automated so the whole thing can be accelerated over time. And again, that's a journey.